My name is Elizabeth Anderson. Everyone calls me Betty. I just turned 65, but I still feel young at heart. I've been living alone since I lost my beloved husband George 3 years ago, but I don't have time to feel lonely. Even after retiring from my 40-year career as an elementary school teacher, I keep busy with local volunteer work and my book club. My motto is, life is a continuous learning experience. George used to laugh and say, "You can't stop being a teacher, even in retirement, can you?" My greatest joy is spending time with my son Michael and his family. Especially my 3-year-old grandson Tommy, who's the light of my life. Just seeing his smile warms my heart. Tomorrow is Tommy's 3rd birthday. I'm so excited already. Michael and Sarah seem to be busy with work, but we're planning to celebrate together over a video call. Yesterday, I went shopping for presents. I bought a dinosaur picture book and a cute dinosaur stuffed animal, both of which Tommy loves. I'm already imagining how happy he'll be, and it fills me with joy. The morning sunlight streaming through the window woke me up. I glanced at the clock. It was only 6 a.m. But today is Tommy's 3rd birthday, and I'm too excited to sleep any longer. I got out of bed and made some coffee first thing. With a warm cup in hand, I headed to the living room. On the table lay the presents I had carefully wrapped last night. I couldn't help but smile. At 8 o'clock, I started preparing for the video call. I turned on my new tablet and checked the connection. I fixed my hair and put on a bright cardigan that Tommy likes. I hung Tommy's favorite dinosaur picture in the background. At 9 a.m., the appointed time, I nervously pressed the call button. As the ringtone sounded, my heart started racing. The screen brightened, and Tommy's face appeared. But at that moment, my smile froze. "Tommy." My voice was trembling. The Tommy on the screen had white bandages wrapped around both eyes. His usual bright smile was nowhere to be seen. "Grandma." Tommy's voice was small and shaky. "Grandma, I can't see anything." With those words, I felt my world crumbling. "Tommy, what happened? What's going on?" I asked frantically. But Tommy remained silent, just trembling his small body. "Michael? Sarah? Are you there?" I called out desperately, but there was no answer. Around Tommy, there were no birthday decorations or cake to be seen. Just white walls and a dimly lit room. What kind of special birthday is this? "Tommy, it's okay. Grandma's coming right away, all right?" Tommy nodded faintly at my words. The video call suddenly cut off. I tried calling back, but couldn't get through. As my mind went blank, I immediately decided to take action. With shaking hands, I grabbed my car keys and rushed out of the house. It's a 3-hour drive to Michael's house. On the way, I called Michael and Sarah's cell phones multiple times, but neither answered. Anxiety and fear spread through my chest, but I told myself I needed to stay calm for Tommy's sake. 3 hours later, I arrived at Michael's house. I knocked on the front door, but there was no response. "Tommy." "It's Grandma," I called out, and I heard a faint noise. Deciding it was an emergency, I used the spare key I had been given before to enter the house. In the dim interior, I found a frightened Tommy. "Grandma." Tommy ran towards me, crying. "It's okay, Tommy. You're safe now." I hugged my grandson tightly. I carefully removed the bandages from Tommy's eyes. Fortunately, there didn't seem to be any major injuries, but there were bruises around his eyes. Anger welled up inside me, but right now, calming Tommy down was the priority. "Tommy, let's go home with Grandma," I said gently while quickly packing his things. Before getting in the car, I called the police and Child Protective Services, briefly explaining the situation. Following their instructions, I decided to move Tommy to a safe place. As I drove, my resolve solidified. What should I do next to uncover the truth and protect Tommy? It's going to be a long night. By the time I brought Tommy back to my house and finally settled him down, it was late into the night. After gently tucking him into bed, I returned to the living room, feeling almost crushed by heavy fatigue and anxiety. Gazing out the window, I desperately tried to figure out what to do next. I still couldn't reach Michael and Sarah. Where on earth were they? And why had they left Tommy in such a state? Questions kept piling up. I took a deep breath to calm myself. "Stay cool, Betty," I told myself. From my years of teaching experience, I knew the importance of remaining calm in difficult situations. First thing in the morning, I called Child Protective Services and gave them a detailed explanation of the situation. They responded quickly, arranging for a social worker to visit my home that same day. Next, I contacted my friend Judy, who lives near Michael's house. "Judy, it's been a while," I said over the phone. Judy sounded surprised. "Betty, what's the matter? Did something happen?" I took a deep breath and briefly explained the situation. Judy's voice was clearly shaken. "Actually," Judy began hesitantly, "things have been strange at Michael's house lately. There's been crying at night, and the curtains are always closed, even during the day." This information amplified my anxiety. After that, I started gathering bits of information from other neighbors. Recent observations of Michael and Sarah, the frequency of their outings with Tommy, noises at night, each piece was like a small part forming an ominous bigger picture. After the social worker's visit, I steeled my resolve. To uncover the truth and protect Tommy, I needed to investigate more thoroughly. The next day, I visited Tommy's preschool. The principal, Mrs. Johnson, seemed surprised by my visit. "Mrs. Anderson," the principal said, "is this about Tommy? He's been absent for 2 weeks. His parents said he had a cold, but..." A cold? Michael hadn't mentioned anything about that. As I inquired further, I learned that Tommy's behavior had been gradually changing. Once an active child, he had become increasingly introverted, and sometimes had unexplained bruises. Next, I visited Tommy's pediatrician. While bound by doctor-patient confidentiality, the doctor, seeing my desperate state, offered some general advice. Recently, we've been particularly vigilant about not missing signs of abuse, the doctor said carefully. Especially unexplained injuries or sudden changes in a child's behavior are cause for concern. These words made my heart clench. As I continued my investigation, I discovered that Michael and Sarah were also having financial problems. There were signs of increasing monetary stress, such as Michael's unstable position at his company and Sarah recently quitting her job. Carol, Sarah's friend who works as a cashier at the local supermarket, also shared some concerning information. Sarah, you know, she's been acting strange lately, Carol said worriedly. She used to be so cheerful, but suddenly she became gloomy. And she stopped bringing Tommy along. But the most shocking information came from Michael's colleague at work. Actually, the colleague began hesitantly. I've seen Michael drinking alcohol during work hours recently. And one day, he accidentally showed someone a photo of his wife with bruises on her arm. The moment I heard this information, I felt something crumble inside me. The reality I didn't want to imagine was slowly being revealed. Back at home, organizing the information I had gathered, I couldn't hold back my tears. To think that my beloved son and daughter-in-law had fallen into such a situation. And above all, that innocent Tommy had become a victim. But now is not the time to be swept away by emotions. There's still more I need to do to protect Tommy and save my family. Gather evidence, report to the appropriate agencies, and confront Michael and Sarah. Looking out the window, I renewed my determination. I intend to do everything in my power to overcome this ordeal and rebuild our family. Faced with the mountain of information I had collected, I let out a deep sigh. Scattered across the table were notes, photographs, and copies of medical records. The reality these pieces of evidence pointed to was far beyond my imagination. How did it come to this? I muttered, reviewing the documents again. Records of Tommy's injuries, testimonies of Michael's drinking, statements from friends suggesting Sarah's depression. All the pieces were pointing to a painful truth. I decided that to handle this situation properly, I needed expert advice. I contacted Jeanette, a longtime friend and retired lawyer. "Betty, this is serious," Jeanette said as she looked through the documents. "There's a high possibility of child abuse. Legally speaking." As I listened to her explanation, I took notes frantically. Child Protective Services, temporary custody orders, and potential criminal charges. These words were becoming frighteningly real. "But first, you should confront them," Jeanette gently added. "There's still a chance to repair the family bonds." Her words gave me a glimmer of hope. The next day, unexpected information came in. A phone call from my old friend John. "Betty, I heard Michael and Sarah are coming back on a cruise ship the day after tomorrow morning." My heart raced. The time for confrontation had finally come. "Thank you, John," I replied, taking a deep breath. "I'll go to the port too." After hanging up, I started preparing. I put the necessary documents in my bag and packed a change of clothes. And I didn't forget Tommy's favorite stuffed animal. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My face looked tired, but my eyes showed strong determination. "I'm ready to meet you," I murmured to the mirror. As the night deepened, I spent a sleepless night. In my mind, the scene of tomorrow's confrontation played over and over. Anger and sadness, and above all, a strong desire to save my family, all intermingled. The next day, as a final preparation, I spent precious time with Tommy. The bruises around his eyes were fading, but the wounds in his heart were still not healed. "Tommy, let's go meet Daddy and Mommy with Grandma, okay?" I spoke gently. Tommy looked anxious but nodded slightly. "Are Daddy and Mommy angry?" Tommy's small voice made my heart ache. "It's all right, Tommy. Grandma's here with you." I hugged him tightly. Imagining the journey to the port, I kept reminding myself, stay calm, but firm. With love, but without compromise. The weight of the documents in my bag tells the gravity of this situation. But even heavier is the importance of this confrontation that could determine the future of our family. Tomorrow morning, we'll head to the port. There, we'll face the truth that has been hidden for so long. And no matter how painful it may be, I believe it will be the first step in repairing our family bonds. All right, everything's ready. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, preparing for tomorrow. Passengers are disembarking one after another from the cruise ship that has arrived at the port. My eyes are desperately searching for Michael and Sarah. Holding Tommy's small hand tightly, my heart is pounding fiercely. And then, finally, I saw them. "Michael! Sarah!" I called out loudly. The moment they turned around, I could see their expressions freeze. As soon as they saw Tommy, the color drained from their faces. "Mom?" Michael's voice cracked. "Why are you here with Tommy?" Sarah was at a loss for words, just standing there with her mouth open. "Grandma, I'm scared," Tommy trembled, clutching the hem of my dress. People around us started to notice our situation, looking on with interest. The tension was palpable in the air. "You're going to explain everything," I said quietly, but in a strong tone. Michael looked around and said anxiously, "Not here. Too many people watching." "Then where should we talk?" I pressed, not backing down. At that moment, several police officers appeared in a corner of the port. They must have been dispatched in response to the Child Services report. Michael and Sarah's faces turned pale. As they tried to run away, I grabbed their arms firmly and said, "You can't run anymore. It's time to tell the truth." The police intervened and guided all of us to a quiet room. There, the shocking truth was revealed. Michael let out a deep sigh and began to speak. "Mom, we couldn't take it anymore." Sarah continued, crying, "The stress from work, the debts, and... Does that give you the right to abuse Tommy?" My voice was shaking with anger. Michael covered his face and said with a choked voice, "At first, it was just scolding. But gradually, it escalated. One day, I impulsively Michael's voice broke off. I pushed Tommy hard. He fell and hit his eye. I was overwhelmed by a complex mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and love for my grandson. Why didn't you ask me for help? My voice was trembling. We were ashamed, couldn't tell anyone. Michael's answer made my heart ache. The police officers were watching the situation with stern expressions, but one female officer was gently talking to Tommy. It's okay now, Tommy. You're safe, she said. At those words, Tommy's body seemed to relax a little. Michael and Sarah were arrested, and Tommy was placed under the protection of Child Protective Services. Witnessing the breakdown of my family, my heart was in turmoil. However, I couldn't help but feel a slight relief that Tommy's safety was now assured. Epilogue. 6 months have passed since then. Michael and Sarah received suspended sentences and are participating in a strict rehabilitation program. Ironically, they ended up being exposed to the public eye they had feared so much. Tommy came to live with me, and day by day, we're working on healing his heart and body. Grandma, can we go to the park today? Tommy asks at the breakfast table. The wounds around his eyes have healed, and his smile is slowly returning. Of course, Tommy, I smile at him gently. The road to rebuilding our family is long and difficult, but I haven't given up hope. Michael and Sarah are sincerely reflecting on their actions and, while receiving counseling, are trying to gradually repair their relationship with Tommy. Betty, thank you so much, Sarah said tearfully during a recent visit. If you hadn't taken action, we would have sunk into a bottomless pit. The family bonds have been deeply wounded, but I believe that with love, patience, and above all, hope, they will surely heal someday. By overcoming this ordeal, our family will become stronger. I firmly believe that the future reflected in Tommy's smile will be filled with happiness.